believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Rendez, also known as Ricky Rendez, and a great episode for you today. Today we have Fiorella and Pasta from the Convo Couch. It's a great show which you can find on Rockfin and YouTube and maybe some other platforms also, but definitely on Rockfin and YouTube. They do great interviews. They also do a good job analyzing what's going on in the world and keeping up with current events. So please check out the Convo Couch. I'll put links in the show description. And we get into some of their origin story and some of that stuff, some of their political views on the show. So I won't get into it now. But I know you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. And before you do enjoy that conversation, let me get some stuff out of the way. Of course, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this podcast or any of the podcasts I share with you guys, any of the conversations I share with you guys, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. If you can support financially, great. And I really appreciate everybody who does. But if you can't, there are ways you can help support the show. Tell people about the show, share the show, review the show, whatever social media platforms you're on, post it there, and that all helps and goes a long way. And for those who can financially support the show, there are a bunch of ways you can do it. One, I have a Patreon page. If you support me on Patreon, once a month I do a Patreon podcast with my Patreon supporters. And recently I also been sharing my Ricky Rants podcast on Patreon with my Patreon supporters. And what that is, it's a solo podcast I do, which is typically found on Rockfin as premium content, but I'm going to post it on Patreon also for my Patreon supporters. So it's one more reason to support me on Patreon. I have a PayPal account if you want to donate. If you're into crypto, you can send me Bitcoin. On my website, go to therippleeffectpodcast.com, click on support, and you'll find the QR code if you want to send me Bitcoin. I have a merch store. If you guys haven't checked out the store, there's tons of new products there and many more coming. I have new logos I just uploaded and one or two on their way that are going to be uploaded very soon. So please check out the rippleeffectpodcast.com. Click on support and you'll find links to all these ways of supporting the show. Or if you want to go directly to the merchandise store, go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. That's merch.com, and that will bring you directly to the merchandise store. You can check out the hoodies, hats, t-shirts, tank tops, mugs, wine tumbler glasses, and much more. So please check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com if you want to go directly to the merchandise store. And last but not least, also check out the University of Reason. Check out their courses. Check out what they have to offer. If you're at a crossroads in life, if you're at a position where you're just not happy or you're unfulfilled or you feel like you want to get more out of life and you have more to offer, please check out the University of Reason, created by my good friend Richard Grove. He's been on the show recently to kind of discuss what made him want to start the University of Reason, what you can get out of it, also how they extract the most value out of you and your talents and your passions in result to hopefully help you get the most value out of your life. So please check out the links below. By signing up, you help support the show. Also by watching and listening to the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rockfin, it helps support the show. So there are plenty of different ways of supporting the show and hopefully more to come. Last thing I promise, please check out my recent appearance on the False Reality Check podcast. They do an amazing job of making the guests feel comfortable to discuss everything and anything and getting deep into personal stories or personal philosophies. And it's just one of my favorite shows to listen to and also one of my favorite shows to be on. So please check out my most recent appearance, which they just released. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
In the ripple effect.
bit of a origin story, maybe your own political journey on how you got to where you are, and then how you developed the show and where that came from?
Do you want the one that's like made for the movies, or you want like the real one? Because we have two versions, and
the truth, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. You can make it all up if you want.
Well, we have that same saying. We say, from New York, never let the truth get in the way of a good bullshit story. And that's one of our mottos. So, I always tell this story that me and Fiorella were working at a brother-sister restaurant in Los Angeles. And we were activists. We were both people participating, I think, at that time in the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I was talking politics with a bunch of employees, fellow coworkers, which I shouldn't have done. You know what I'm saying? You're not supposed to do that in the workspace, but I don't give a damn. So I was doing that. And somebody was like, you got to meet Fee. I mean, Fiorella, who works over there, I met her one time before. Like, yeah, but she's kind of into the same things as you are, and you sound exactly the same. And then I just called Fee. I went over and introduced myself. When I was walking in the room, the In Excess song was playing, and she was filling soy sauces, and that's where we met, over by the soy sauces. You're gonna get the red one and the green one, Charlie. The red one and the green one, Ricky.
This is what the mainstream media does.
Yeah.
Embellish its stories. Is this belly count?
Yeah. And that was that. What was the song, Fee? Our favorite song by Intersex. Right?
I didn't even know who they were until you pointed them out.
Yeah, it's that song, and they'll never tear us apart. And I make that joke all the time. It's like, I'm unlucky in love, but I met the best business partner in the world. That was like 5 years ago. Other than the song and the soy sauces, we just started talking. And, at one point, I was working at another restaurant, and Fee was just like, we were talking. I'm like, should we do this? Should we get into this and give it a shot? And we said, yeah, and we were all about picking the place, a location where we can do some really serious political talk, have an arena of sorts. And that's when we ran into Creative Studios LA. And that's where I'm back working with in this particular studio in Vegas. So it's come full circle. But yeah, I've done the combo couch with Fiorella longer than I've had any job in my life. You know what I'm saying? Longer than I've done anything. And it's kind of crazy when you just look back to the fact that we were just activists that wanted to provide, a platform for grassroots candidates. And we wanted to talk a lot about foreign policy because we thought it was lacking in the progressive world. And they were very, ignorant to what was going on. And they still are, obviously, hint, hint. And, ever since then, and, we've been doing the combo couch and rocking. So it just, I never thought it would turn into, something, what it is today. I just wanted to have a voice out there and just live out my passions before I leave this earth one day and throw my hat in the ring. And I was able to find my partner and do that.
Now, do you want to correct the record?
Yeah. So none of that happened about the soy sauces and INX playing in the background.
In Excess, fam. Remember, it's boomers. In Excess.
Oh, whatever. See, and so somebody did say like, "Hey, you guys are Bernie people," and like we were like, "Oh, we're Bernie people," because it was like 2015, and I had started getting involved with the Bernie Sanders like people and the community. And it's crazy to think about that now, because now, God, all those people hate us, and it's just like they're stuck in 2015, and it just sort of. We were also actors back then, so we were okay with being in front of the camera all the time, and like that is also played a really important part of it, and understanding like people's chemistry on camera and understanding how that works. And also, for me, I had been doing like writing for very, very like trivial things like reviewing hotels, restaurants, getting to like, go to wineries, like very like fashion, a bunch of things that have absolutely nothing to do with politics. And the whole world felt extremely vapid to me, extremely like just boring, like because it was just at some point it's just all like aesthetics, and it can be fun, but it can also be extremely just limited. And so Pasta and I began, like you said, talking in terms of politics, and he would ask me to help him out when he was arguing with neoliberals. And so I would write things out for him for Facebook because Facebook was the thing to use at that time. I barely go on Facebook now. Because it's like wow, like everyone's a liberal or a moron or you get censored. But anyway, so that sort of started, and we both wanted to do a show of sorts, and that's just kind of how it came about. And he's right, we did start working with creative what is it?
Studios.
Creative studios. Yeah. And yeah, and they were great. And then we wanted to do it more than once a week. So we started producing it ourselves in our in-home studio in Pasadena. We became roommates and that sort of thing. And then my brother came in and started helping a lot with the engineering, because the engineering is also what took the show to the next level. Initially, we started on Facebook, but then we went on YouTube like a year and a half later or so. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's definitely a different place where we're at now completely. I want nothing to do with elections in terms of like electoral politics, in terms of people, interviewing candidates for office and all of that stuff. I want zero to do with that. I don't care what you are. You could be a socialist, a communist, a libertarian, like whatever, even if you're outside of the two-party system, because we don't have fair elections and none of these third parties are really tackling that issue. And we know we don't have fair elections because we've been studying, and I wouldn't even say we're activists. I would say we specialize in election. We have studied election. We have done on the ground reporting and journalism on elections. So to me, when somebody tries to tell me about elections and how the elections were fair and blah, 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 they don't even know what they're talking about. It's like with COVID. You can tell they don't know what they're talking about. You can tell they don't know, they haven't done any research, because it's something that you have to really know in order to talk about it. It's something that has its own terminology, its own specific things. And so for me, I'm no longer interested in that. I'm interested more in what we're doing now, which is like a lot of foreign policy, heavy foreign policy, the surveillance state, and geopolitics internationally, how things interact, the history of everything. We covered Burisma and we covered what was happening with the Maidan coup. One of the first few shows we had, we talked about that. I mean, we've been covering this for a while, so it's really frustrating seeing people all of a sudden get this wrong when it was, as Pasta says, it was a layup, like with what's happening now with Russia and Ukraine. So that's kind of like the origin of a story, a more realistic one than Pasta. You guys can choose your ending or choose your story for what you want.
Well, I think what you're saying is so important in regards to election, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or just give me your input. But when people talk about, you would hear people say, all the people who are Trump supporters think the election was stolen or whatever. They're, and they kind of dismiss that whole idea. I look at them like, this isn't a Trump thing. I'm like, since forever, every election has had fuckery. Now, you can argue how much fuckery and if the fuckery had some effect on the outcome, but that's a whole nother argument. This argument that there isn't any fuckery is just insane. Like, obviously, you guys have probably seen it, Hacking Democracy, that HBO documentary that's quite a few years old now. But I mean, and you can go all the way back, and I think you said on the Tinfoil Hat podcast, Pasta, you were talking about how you go back to JFK and the rumors of like dead people voting and that type of stuff. I mean, so since the beginning of time, there's always been rigging of elections, and like I said, then the argument is like how much rigging and how did it affect the outcome? Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think there hasn't been an election that's been fair for decades in this country specifically. And the thing about going to other countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, and Peru in the global south is that you notice that a lot of these countries, which all of them at least have elected some sort of leftist president, which at this point, let's reiterate the fact that left there means a different thing than it does here. But they have elected somebody that people that are leftist, but their election systems would be considered a right-wing, new Jim Crow here, because they have one day to vote and they have to vote in the place they're assigned to. They cannot change it. It's either paper ballots, or if it's not, I think for all the ones we visited, they were all paper ballots.
Yeah.
And you had to show your ID. You had to, they also had pictures of your ID. And in most places, you had to be marked somewhere or some form or another. You know, in Nicaragua, you had black ink marking your thumb to show that you voted already, because they didn't want people to vote twice. There is no vote by mail. And, you know,
No
it's a
drop
very,
boxes. Yeah.
no drop. Yeah. It's a very like just strict, secure process that if we said, hey, let's ask everyone for ID here, and there's no drop boxes, no vote by mail, you have one day to vote. Of course, it was a weekend where people voted. You know, it was like
a holiday,
like a weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they would make like a holiday out of it. Also, in some places, it's compulsory to vote. In Peru, if you don't vote, you get a fine, because they want you to really pay attention. And guess what? A lot of these people in these countries have no choice but to pay attention, because they're directly affected by everything that happens, foreign policy wise. And so it's just crazy how when we say that, when we say, well, you know, they're they need an ID there, and it's how you keep a chain of custody. It's how you keep security. It's how you combine and balance accessibility with security. And people here are like, no, but we can't get IDs to all the people, so that pushes people of color away. And it's like, wait a minute, so you're telling me that like that a third world country, or countries that have been hit directly by US sanctions, can somehow find ways to get IDs to everybody, like to, you know, places where there's no roads, in some cases, like in Peru and Honduras, that have been ravaged by a lot of just political unrest. They managed to get IDs to a lot of people, indigenous communities in Peru. They managed to get IDs to these people, but we somehow cannot get IDs to everybody in the country we live in. That's by design, because they don't want us to have fair and transparent elections. And yet, of course, they weaponize the left with this whole talk of, oh, it's racist and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the Republicans play their role, because they also do the same thing on their own turf. And so it becomes this system where it's like gangs, and they rig elections, and then they sort of play together when they want to screw over the people, but then they go back to their rigging of elections in the turf. And so we have the most, I believe, just distrustful election system, the worst election system, I think, in modern times that I've seen. I mean, I have a hard time thinking that any other one is worse, because we don't have control. We have black box voting systems. We don't get to see our vote. There is no public counting. There's public counting like in places like Nicaragua and places like Honduras. There's not public counting here. So it's just kind of like we're very, very backward in that sense.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because like I had on my fingers, make sure you mention the public counting, you know what I'm saying? Because Fee hit every single point, you know, from the drop boxes to the IDs to the day, the holiday. The only other thing I would add to that is the expediency, and Fam can speak to this too as well. At one of the most busiest places, Ricky. Now, granted, we went to Bilwi, which was the opposite side of the country from Managua. So we witnessed in the indigenous area that voting over there, the mellifluousness, the way it was so expedient and flowing, whatnot. In one of the busiest spots, it took an average of 8 minutes to vote. In some of the quick spots, 2 minutes in votes. And that's part of, to me, when you talk about opening up the elections to make it more inclusive to everybody, whatnot, you know what I'm saying, and expanding it for people to have more opportunities to vote. Well, you have to factor in the time it takes to vote. You know, in LA, they sold us this fake bill of goods that we're going to have all these vote centers, and you can go to any one of these vote centers, and then you don't have to go to any one and whatnot. And then the accessibility is there. Well, if it takes you 4 hours to vote, you know, at UCLA, the kids were waiting 7 hours. Some spots in Austin, Texas, 8 hours. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's not an accessible election to me whatsoever. And that's the whole thing. When we talk about all these things that Fam just mentioned, and what I mentioned too as well, the public counting is so important. Like, they do the counting of everybody in public. They hold it up. People are 8 feet away. One person says the name who voted for that. They say the name, and it gets marked on the board for everybody to see. 99% of our tabulation in our country, when it comes to our election day votes, our votes, are counted by proprietary software. You know, first of all, they're whisked off to another location, a secret location to be counted and whatnot, where a lot of people don't have access to even go in there. In LA, They don't even let you bring the cameras in the room, so you can only go in there with a naked eye. And then they count these ballots on machines that have proprietary software. We don't even know what the software looks like. And here's the other thing, Ricky, it's proprietary ownership, because it's usually a trust fund of a zombie company, of another zombie company. We don't even know who's, counting our ballots over here. So there's so many things. So when people, it should blow your mind when people go, oh, no, it was the safest election whatsoever. They don't even understand the process. And when you have the processes, what we have, and the framework, what we have in our elections, you can never say it's a legit count, because we don't know. There is zero transparency in our election, as opposed to when you go to Nicaragua, full transparency and accountability. So it is just blows my mind that people are okay with this. But just like Fee said, they weaponize each side against each other. Oh, you want ID? You're racist. You don't want people of color to vote. You know what I'm saying? That's ridiculous. That it's just a ridiculous statement. And they're not even allowed to hand out water at these places, which is another lie, which Biden was telling about the Georgia bill and stuff. And people are going, oh my God, the Republicans want to make it harder to vote. They won't even give you water, which is not true. If you read the bill, and Fam did a great tweet thread and broke it down, a good article about it too as well. Party officials, if you're in the Democratic Party or if you're in the Republican Party, you're not allowed to bribe anybody with food or beverage. But the election workers that are there have plenty of water. Nobody's going thirsty. So the way it's also manipulated by our elected officials in the mainstream media is very sad. The fact that our citizens just want to play team sports and say that it was good, and the other side wants to say it's not good. It's mind-blowing, to say the least.
Do you guys think it's fixable?
I don't listen. I would say we need election reform, and Fam would say, Pasta, give it up. You can't reform this crap. You got to blow it up. We need election revolution. You know what I'm saying? So you listen. At the end of the day, even after the zombie apocalypse, there's going to be some form of a voting, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, who wants to go this way? If enough people say that, they're going to go this way. And if a small amount of people say that, they're not going to go that way, whatever the case may be. So I don't know if you really want to call it reform or revolution, but to fix the problem, we got to go back to kissing it. Keep it simple, stupid. Remember what they said in school? Just get back to the old school ways, in which way they do in Nicaragua and Honduras and these other countries. And yes, I mean, it will work if we just keep it simple, but they have it so crazy to fix it. It's going to take a lot of wrenches and bolts and, hammers in there.
I don't think you can fix it. I mean, comes from my belief that the current system is beyond fixing. So it's not just elections. The elections are a product of the current system, and the current system is corrupt to the core, and the people in it aren't just going to give up power willingly. They're not just going to say, okay, well, let's give you guys fair elections so you can vote us out. They're not going to do that. So what you have left is just, you have to have complete and total public awakening, not to be confused with wokeness, but complete and total awakening to understand how to either change the government in some way or fashion. I mean, even in the Declaration of Independence, it said itself, right? It says it in the text of the Declaration of Independence, basically to surmise that when these officials, the government is too corrupt, it is your duty to get rid of that government, right? And I have to be careful with what I say, because now we're in an age where, everybody's a domestic violent extremist. But it is that. I mean, there has to be some sort of entire revolt against it. And I don't know if revolution is the right word. You could say election revolution, but in terms of the change that has to happen, I don't think you can just reform it under the current system. It's like getting anything under this current system, right? Getting a UBI or getting healthcare for all. I'm one of the people that are advocates of a healthcare system where people don't have to pay for it. But what caveats and what dotted lines is a healthcare system under the current administration, under the current intelligence apparatus going to have, under a global capitalist sort of, just say a global system, surveillance system? What kind of system of healthcare would we have under that? So for me, it's like anything that we get could be okay, but it's only going to be a band-aid solution until we get rid of the whole system. And how we do that, well, like, it has to come from people stopping the economy. If tomorrow truckers wanted to literally say we're not going to deliver goods because gas prices are too high and there's mandates and all of this, and it could start with the truckers, but it would require people to be directly affected, I think, in the United States, because the United States still has people that are comfortable, people that are distracted, that, people want to be distracted. They want to watch Netflix. They want to watch reality TV. They want to focus on their own lives, and they still can afford to do it. Whereas in other countries, I think it happens more often because the conditions are there. The material conditions are there for people to say, oh crap, we're being sanctioned. If we don't grow our own food and if we don't become self-sustainable, the United States is sanctioning us. We're not going to be able to get food. So we need to find a way to get food in our country. So they do that. And so they develop self-sustainability. We've seen Russia do that. We've seen Nicaragua do that. We've seen Cuba do that. And of course people suffer. But at the end of the day, they learn through that suffering. In the United States, we haven't really been victims of our foreign policy until the last few years, where I think we saw a little bit of that happening through the whole war between the police and all of that happening. I think a lot of people started seeing that even on January 6th, when a lot of the Trump supporters, while we were there, were yelling at the cops saying, hey, Blue, we backed you. What are you doing? And of course, they need to realize the police are an extension of the surveillance state. And so it's this whole thing where I think it's not going to happen until people physically feel what like the downturn of the policies that these people create, or pretend to create, while a few manage them. And is it possible without violence? Maybe, but it's getting increasingly harder to see that, because this is an empire, and an empire in decay is a very tumultuous place to be in.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think the system isn't fixable because one, it's created by corrupt people. Every time there's a bill or new law or whatever, on the surface, they make it look like it's for the middle class or for the people in the ghetto or in the poor areas, whatever it may be. And then it's really just a way of benefiting themselves. I mean, there's always some other nonsense that has nothing to do with it. Jen Brimey, who has been on the show before too, from Congressional Dish podcast, she's always dissecting bills and seeing, like, people will vote a certain way based on who's giving them money, who's, and I've had Jack Abramoff on the show years ago after he got out of prison, and he we talked about it. I know obviously a lot of people don't like him. I'm obviously not a huge fan of him either, but I think having somebody like him who knew how to manipulate the system, knew all the loopholes and how it's such a facade, having him directly tell you, like, listen, we give language to a politician. We just say, put this in the bill. They don't even read it. They just, okay, where's my check? And that's it. And so I think it's, you can't fix it. And I know there's a lot of people who still believe in the whole every vote matters nonsense, and you should vote. And if you don't vote, then you shouldn't have a say. And I completely disagree with that. I think, unfortunately, politics, I mean, we don't run because we're moral people. Like, we've created a system where in business, in politics, in just about everything, we reward the craziest people who have the least morals. And we've created a system that's kind of designed to kind of benefit those people, and because they're usually the ones who are influencing the way it works. So has your political ideologies changed a little bit? Because probably much like myself, you guys probably feel politically homeless much of the time. Has, from the start of the show till now, do you guys think you kind of look at things pretty similar, or has it evolved? What's your political journey like? Because obviously I love the lockdown left, which is going by pasta. Have you guys been disappointed by people that you agreed with or had respect for, and how has that changed the way you look at things?
Damn, I went first last time, so.
Damn, okay, I thought you were gonna go first because it was your turn. But
Oh,
fine.
I'm a gentleman, and I'm gonna let the lady go first.
Absolutely. In terms of a lot of people have disappointed me. I mean, a lot of people, big names, a lot of people who we started out this journey with in the Bernie Sanders movement are no longer our friends. And I mean, I'm only going to speak for myself, but like a lot, but we like, we had like a lot of friends in LA, like this activist community. And it started with I would say Trump's election really broke people's brains. But even that, there was still that in 2016, people who I knew who voted for Jill Stein, and we stood firmly and said, no, we're not voting for Hillary Clinton. We're not going to do that. And, that sort of thing. But then, of course, with the media and the propaganda making Trump to be the worst president, and Bernie Sanders, of course, continuing to echo that sentiment, the Russiagate issue was the next issue, where they were all convinced that Russia hacked our elections. And I was still angry that Bernie Sanders didn't fight back against what was done to him, and that they were ignoring all of that, right? And that WikiLeaks showed that there was a rigged election against Bernie Sanders, and nobody was talking about that. They were so focused on Russiagate. And then, of course, the re-election movement from the midterms of 2018 onto 2020, it became all about, we have to get rid of Trump, we have to get rid of Trump. And they began co-opting every facet of the progressive contingent. And they sort of showed that it was very easy to do. And so then, of course, we got into the election itself between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders's failed run, because it was largely co-opted with a lot of people from Center for American Progress, from the DC Beltway of the Democratic Party. And when I tried to call it out and say, hey, these people are corrupt, they're trying to thwart his campaign, I even warned about just really like weird practices in the caucuses. We caught coin tosses and all of that, because I attended and reported on all of that. And people were mad, were saying I was being negative, and like all this stuff. And it was a lot of people that I had known and been friends with. And so then it just was like, oh, well, the elections are fair. Bernie just didn't have enough support. Yeah, sure. The guy who was like fifth turned out to be number one. Kamala, who didn't have a single delegate, is vice president. And, of course, what Pasta explained, 7-hour lines where people were getting pizza delivered to them in LA because they had to wait for 7 hours in line. And so they bought the whole thing, right? And then, of course, that was the primary. And then the general, and it was just the same exact thing, where we were watching the election and we're like, this is a statistical impossibility for this to happen. And then, of course, the backlash of even saying anything, like saying, hey, we should take a look at this. This isn't okay. Oh, you're a Trump supporter. You're blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, January 6th, I think, was the dagger for a lot of things, when I was arguing with people who I had like broken bread with, who I had worked with, who called me a white supremacist sympathizer for saying that Ashley Babbitt shouldn't have been shot and killed, because I thought cops shootings were bad, and so that was going to be a consistent thing for me, instead of something that was only okay or not okay when it was my team. And so that sort of just did it. And then, of course, the pandemic, and that was, that was the biggest split out of everything, and it still is, I think, in terms of who like saw through it and who didn't. And we just got completely like told that we were like, anti-vaxxers and this and that, and like conspiracy theorists, and just completely just labeled so many things. But before it was just, you're Russian asset, you're this. And now it was, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're this. It was the same. It was just so bad. And of course, now we're here at the next PSYOP, where it's, Russia, Ukraine, and you must be once again, we're back. You must be a Russian asset. You must be paid by Putin, and all of this stuff. And they don't realize that they're being manipulated by the media. And I told Pastas, and it took one election cycle for them to turn the progressives into full-on next generation of neoliberals. So yeah, I mean, if I was at some point aligned with the Bernie Sanders contingent, I am no longer aligned with that. It's not because I have necessarily changed. It's because they have remained in a place where they shouldn't be anymore. You shouldn't be stuck in 2016, in 2015. New information has come. New information has been had a light shine on it. So you take that new information and you move on and you look into things. And I would say politically, I'm still an anti-imperialist. I'm still very far left. I mean, ideally, I believe in a very collectivist ideology. I just don't think humanity is ready for what I want yet. And so for me, it's kind of like, I don't think at this point it matters that I tell you that I consider myself, somebody that is of the socialist nature, because a lot of people who label themselves that are the most authoritarian pricks I've ever met in my life. And I have never experienced more racism and more bigotry from anybody as I have from that group that turns so rabid and so segregationist and so pro now neo-Nazi. And it's crazy. It's sad, but I think it's also going to happen. I think it was meant to happen. These fractures were meant to happen. And I think the most important thing right now is to unite with people who are anti-war and who are anti-surveillance state, because those are, I think, our biggest, the things that control pretty much everything else, where everything else comes from. Because if we're looking at, Julian Assange, and we're looking at why he's in prison, and we're looking at what's happening right now in Russia, Ukraine, and how they're propagandizing the hell out of people to manufacture consent for war and to continue, of course, this control via this pandemic and this global pandemic treaty that they want to impose. And of course, this credit system that they're going to try to implement. And then the fourth industrial revolution, that is a whole part of that. I think that if you take that into account, I think that's the most important thing right now to focus on. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could say we're homeless, but I don't think it matters right now to be politically homeless.
No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Did you have something to say, Ricky? I'll wait.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with you. I feel like my views haven't changed. Just the people who agree with me have changed. Like they just, it's like, I'm like, I stand for the same things I've always stood for. The whole, I've always stood for medical freedom. Everybody can have their own opinions on vaccines or whatnot. I'm a big fan of naturopathic medicine. I'm a big fan of, just eating organically, taking care of your body, and your body creates the best medicine. And I don't trust big pharma when we're talking about the pill epidemic, when you're talking about Pfizer with the biggest fines in history of pharmaceutical drugs, and all of a sudden they became the good guys. And a lot of people who I consider liberal or left were the ones who were anti-chemicals, anti-Monsanto. Like, so when I was really deep into that movement, it was like, okay, you guys stood with me, and now all of a sudden you don't want to stand with me because it just happens that people on the right are now kind of fighting for the same things I'm fighting for. So to me, yeah, without a doubt, it seems like a lot of people who are consistent, they're the ones who get left behind, because everybody else is just playing team politics, where just like, I just defend my team, and it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, So Pasta, go ahead.
Well, no, I exactly everything you said there and everything that Fee said, I just 100% agree with. But I think there has been a little change in some ideologies, right? I think really, to tell you the truth, the biggest thing about, the Convo Couch, and Steve would say it all the time, it's like we hit a crossroads and he was wondering which way we were going to go. I think our recognition of power and actually who's pulling the strings, and that's something a lot of conservatives or, right wingers would talk about, whatever you want to call, label them nowadays. Really, in our clan, a lot of people didn't know what DARPA was. What I'm saying? They never heard what DARPA is, or the WHO or the World Economic Forum. At the core, I think we're still there. We're still anti-imperialist. But for instance, I think, I'm going to speak for myself. I used to be like anti-Second Amendment. Now it's like, no, I'm like pro-Second Amendment. Like, I want to get myself something to protect myself from the CIA. God forbid they try to come into my house. But, I've evolved on that. Civil liberties, right? I'm anti-imperialist. I'm anti-surveillance state, but I'm also big time pro civil liberties. I used to call myself a progressive, and then as we started kind of like, moving along with this whole process since 2016, I eventually called myself the leftist libertarian. Now, I've never went to a libertarian party function, you know what I'm saying? But I understood their anti-regime mentality, their anti-interventionist, their pro-civil liberties, whatnot, you know, and those things I hold dear to my heart because I think they're very, very important right now. So I think there has been somewhat of a change. I think there's been a recognition of power. And when new information comes to light, you have to run with that information. And it is kind of crazy because you were talking about your situation with Monsanto. All the people that me and Fee started out in the streets with and stuff, their number one issue was Medicare for all. And they hated the pharmaceutical lobbyists. Now they bow down to it. They took a knee to it. And I can't understand it. You talked about, you know, the biggest fines of all time. All the companies, all these pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer, one of their biggest fines that they ever have, I believe, was manipulating data, lying to the public about, you know, actual data on their medications. So why would you believe them? And why wouldn't you think they would play and fix the data with the whole, you know, boop boop situation? And as election integrity activists, that's something we know about manipulation of data. We understand how that works. If you just move around the process and how you report things or how you distribute that information, then you can change the whole perception and the whole narrative of that data you're trying to put forth. So, I mean, it is kind of amazing and stuff. Like, I think that a lot of people have kind of just matriculated to the team sports mentality with the Trumpism, with the COVIDism. But there have been slight changes, I think, or a little bit more tweaks, paying attention more important to certain things in the ideology that we might not necessarily paid attention to back when we first started. At least that's the way I feel.
Yeah, yeah, and the pharmaceutical companies, what people don't know is they don't have to release any studies that show that their drugs aren't safe and effective. They only release what they want to release. They submit stuff to the FDA. The FDA can, you know, they look it over, and they're all in bed together anyways because you have the revolving door. People work for big pharma now in the FDA and vice versa. So there's there's tons of examples of lawsuits that led to releasing of documents that showed that stuff was unsafe and knowingly unsafe. And, you know, that's kind of one of the arguments, you know, about capitalism is, you know, people always talk about, oh, well, here are the good things. And I'm like, well, there's also some bad things, you know? And I had, I don't know if you guys ever watched the film Dark Water, but so I had the attorney on my show who that was based on it, the DuPont thing. And, you know, they knew that Teflon and the nonstick pans, if that stuff got in your food, it could be harmful. They knew tons of stuff that they were doing could potentially harm people. And they didn't care because it was about profit. So without a doubt. And also another thing you talked about, Pasta, that I think is interesting, because I'm kind of with you and kind of had a similar internal dilemma in regards to my opinions on nationalism, because, you know, I started getting very political, or not political, but more aware of things after 9/11. And, you know, I was very anti-Afghan going to Afghanistan, very anti Iraq. I was Iraq war. I got really into geopolitics and just the history of it all and how everything seems to be a proxy war. And, you know, and you get into General Smedley Butler and, you know, war is a racket and how it's all a nonsense. And then I'm like, nationalism and being patriotic is just used to get these people to fight wars for no reason. And I always looked at it as like, okay, there's no upside to like having this extreme nationalism until 2020, because then it was the one time that I started seeing like, okay, these people who truly believe in what what the founding fathers were trying to build and basically what they believed in, and those are the people who are fighting. You know, those are the ones who are going, you know, who are really outspoken because they're saying this isn't what America is about and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so there's some benefits in it, you know. So I've kind of like yourself, there's certain things that I've become much more flexible with and I'm much more open to, because I can see how, you know, it's a tool, right? Nationalism and being patriotic and being proud of your country and what it stands for and all those things, it can be used. People, and it's not their fault, you know, the powers that be can use that and use that focus to convince you that somebody on the other side of the world who could care less about what you're doing, hates your freedom, and you can do that. Or it can be a motivation to say, like, hey, all this extreme loss of privacy, all this government overreach, like, this isn't what this country is founded on. We're turning into these, communist countries or dictator like countries that tell you that, hey, you're giving up a little bit of your freedoms, you're giving up a little bit of your security, but we're protecting you. So it is like this balancing act where, like, I can see the pros and cons of it, and it's not necessary. But that's the thing about a lot of these issues, like, it's not black and white, and that's why these things need to be discussed. And that's why, when people talk about socialism, right, it's another perfect example of it, how they've used it to just simplify things. And it's like, oh yeah, socialism bad, and that's just what people say. And it's like, well, you do know, like, post office, firemen, the fact that public funding goes into paving our roads. I'm like, those are all like socialistic ideas, right? And so it's like, a lot of times people just kind of, they read the headlines and it's like, socialism bad. So let me just repeat, socialism's always bad. Anything that is related to socialism is bad, so without a doubt. So how, going forward, like, obviously the COVID thing was a huge focus, and now people are focused on geopolitics a little more, but kind of brainwashed by both sides. It's funny how a lot of people who didn't believe the media on COVID, now they're like, yeah, Fox News is right. Yeah, Ukraine, good, Russia bad, and it's that simple. And I'm like, wait. Let's give people credit when they deserve it. When Tucker Carlson has Dr. Peter McCullough on and he's questioning big pharma, give him some credit. But then when he's simplifying what's going on in Europe, I'm like, he should get bashed for that. And he's still mainstream media, so there's other things going on behind the scenes. Are you guys concerned about? I feel like we've made some progress in regards to waking people up, because the COVID, the whole situation got very deep into our personal lives. It was affecting our ability to go to work, affecting our ability, like you said, to be occupied with other things and being distracted. And now, I'm starting to see the same issue we used to have with trying to get people to wake up with geopolitics. It's, they have their freedoms, they get to go out to eat, they get to do whatever, they get to be distracted, so they don't care because it doesn't affect them personally at home. Are you concerned that people are just going to start believing the mainstream media again, and kind of it's going to be hard for people to wake up to what's really going on, because it just seems like it's easier to stay distracted, where during 2020, 2021, and even till recently, it seems like people were a little bit more intrigued with, okay, who is Bill Gates? And maybe there is something to that, or maybe that conspiracy theory isn't just bullshit. Maybe there is something there. And now people are back to, like, just kind of believing the mainstream media.
Well, I don't know who's believing the mainstream media. I just saw a graph about, like, people who are vaccinated, how much more they believe in the Ukraine needs weapons narrative as opposed to people who are unvaccinated.
Oh, really?
So I just think you're seeing more. Yeah, I saw this crazy chart. Fam, you know what chart I'm talking about? We saw the other day.
Yeah, Max posted it.
He put it up there in the and a couple other people put it up. It just kind of blows my mind. I just think we're entering into more of that, and it's kind of weird too, because it definitely exposed to the government we have and whatnot, as far as, like, the true colors of who they really are at the end of the day, or who represents them and who they're speaking for. That's our lawmakers, that is, because with this situation, all those people, right, that were the warmongers of why a lot of us kind of probably maybe registered as a Democrat back in the day, the Iraq war. We heard a lot of conservatives and conservative lawmakers and even, Republicans at the dinner table, at the Thanksgiving dinner table, justify going into Iraq and saying, we got to get rid of this monster and Saddam Hussein and whatnot. And then some of us were, wait a second, there was nobody from Iraq, who hit the towers, whatnot, being a lot of questions about that whole situation. But now they're back, what I'm saying? Now they've come out and they're here again. The Mitt Romneys, the Mitch McConnells, and the Lindsey Grahams. So even though, Congress has gone back and shown their true colors, whatnot, they've pivoted back to the warmongers. I think there's a lot of people, that are just not, buying into it. There might be a small amount of people who, when they split that team A, team B, when it came to the COVID situation, that still might be like buying into this whole situation. But I really believe they're not selling the narrative the way they wanted to. I don't believe people are believing in the mainstream somewhat. So much more information is coming out there, especially on social media. You know, we've been demonetized and censored on YouTube. We finally got a video the other day that hit 20,000. It was Gonzalo Lira, who was inside the Ukraine. And, you know, FAM also brought a video thread, a Twitter thread that had all these pictures of Ukrainian citizens getting taped up to the poles and staped to the poles, you know, and they were labeled by the British media. I couldn't believe it, as just looters. Ukrainians are securing people down who are trying to loot or take advantage of the Russian invasion. I think people are calling bullshit on this, and they're not believing in the mainstream media. The only thing I'm really concerned about is that the ruling class has used this moment to take away more of our civil liberties, to do more shadow banning, demonetizing, and giving people strikes and taking them down. The fact that they wiped RT out across the board, where YouTube is concerned, DirecTV, you know, that's the scary part to me. But as far as the people, I don't believe they're buying the BS. And I'm hoping this might be a moment that lights a little fire on their ass and gets them in the streets. I think sooner or later, enough is enough, because you can mess around with this or that, but when you start messing with gas prices, Ricky, you don't cross the line.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that the people you're talking about, they exist. For sure. I've seen them. And I've talked about how you see through the COVID narrative and not see that it's directly related. It's being promoted and pushed by the same structures, by the same system that is pushing this, you know, propaganda proxy war with Russia. There are some of those people, but I think they're in the minority. And the reason that those people exist is because team sports mentality exists in the United States. Some of these people still think Russia is communist, when Vladimir Putin is more of a right or centrist right nationalist. And, you know, their hatred for communism and perhaps their hatred for Russia, that's been embedded in American psyche since the 1950s. It remains there, and it's a very strong type of brainwashing that's been happening. So I think that's why that's there. It's still a team sports kind of mentality. It's also part of the nationalism that you were mentioning, a part of like America, you know, we're the good guys. We're going to be Captain America. We're going to save the world. It's the evil Russians that are, you know, the bad guys. And you can see it in every single Born Identity movie and every single CIA type of a propaganda film that's been made in the last few decades. So it's not surprising that jingoistic type of attitude prevails when it comes to a lot of people on the right. Now, in terms of what I think is happening with most people, though, I agree with Pasta. I think most people are starting to see through this because just like with the COVID narrative, there's just too much other information. And the fact is that they're so blatantly censoring everything that the more they censor people, the louder some of these voices get. When they censored and started attacking Joe Rogan and both Dr. Peter McCullough and Malone for going on there, people started researching who they were. And so that sort of backfired on them. And when they took my Twitter account down, it just made it go viral. And this whole thing. So where it's not working. Like, the censoring of voices is bad and it's terrible. And we're at an all-time high of censorship, like what he mentioned with RT, now completely obliterated from YouTube. Now they could do that to any single one of us at any given moment for whatever reason that they want. And we've been warning about this since, of course, they took down Alex Jones. As much as I was never an Alex Jones fan, it was like the beginning of going after everybody, using a guy that a lot of people, you know, didn't like or like to make fun of as the bait to then extend it to everybody else. And so that's what they've been doing. They've been using people on the right or on the left to bait everybody into, you know, allowing this sort of censorship. And so where we're at, I think, is where people are realizing this because they're so adamant about censoring everybody and protecting their narrative as being the only narrative that gets told, that people are starting to ask questions like, what is this really happening? Oh, there's really neo-Nazis. Oh crap. Okay. So, and so there's only so much you can defend neo-Nazis. I mean, especially when you have like, the progressives that call everybody that is to the right of Bernie Sanders a white supremacist. So it's kind of hilarious to see, a lot of these people with Ukrainian flags on their profiles. Oh, like, yeah, we support Ukraine, we support democracy. It's laughable at this point. And also the fact that the economic sector is changing, and there's nobody that politically can deny that. That has more to do with economics, and with what's happening is that the dollar is in danger. India is doing business with Russia and rupees to rubles. You have Saudi Arabia saying, well, we might recognize the yuan over the dollar, because they know what time it is. They know that this shift is happening, and this is something we've been talking about since we were in Nicaragua, where there is you see this sort of multipolar shift happening. And what I mean by that is, initially, for the longest time, the United States and the West, NATO controlled the world, is saying, oh, this is how things are going to go. We have the upper hand. Everybody just has to kind of give in and do things our way. Well, that's happening. That shift is changing. I don't necessarily think, a concentration of power is always going to be good. Example, China. But I don't consider China an empire. I consider it a superpower, because they don't have military bases all over the world like the United States does. I consider Russia a superpower as well, because they're influential. But I think China could potentially get to that point. I think there are a lot of things to criticize about China as well. However, I see that people want to try something different, and they see where things are going. And so I think Americans are in for a rude awakening. I think a lot of Americans are slowly realizing that we are like an empire in decay. Everything. You can even see it in the arts. You can see it in how music and movies are basically recreations of things from the past. It's not like the creativity is like stagnant right now. People don't know what's next. They just want to be distracted. And so I honestly think like they're realizing it, but by the time people realize it, it might be a little late to do anything about it. But I think also, in the more optimistic end, when things fall apart, that is an opportunity to rebuild something. And I think in the long run, what we're going to see as a result of this proxy war with Russia is Russia will be fine because they have other markets that they can go to. But the people in the United States and the people of Europe, the working classes, are not going to be fine. And eventually they're going to feel it. And once they feel it, then it's going to be like, okay, well, now what do we do? And I think, it's kind of like a child that that it's been spoiled. And until they learn and they're punished, then it's like they realize, okay, well, now I can't keep doing this anymore. And I think we're going to get there. I just don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah, that's an important point about just, when the whole 2020 thing happened, and obviously the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all those things became topics of discussion. Everybody's like, the new normal is bad. We don't want the new normal. And then sometimes I would have to like pump the brakes and be like, well, the old normal needed some fixing too. It's not like we had everything worked out before that. I mean, we had imperialism, we had the empire growing, and obviously wars all over the place. I mean, nobody's protesting bombing in Yemen. Nobody's mad about Libya and the mess that's there. Nobody's telling or protesting the fact that we do business with Saudi Arabia, and if we're all about human rights. It's obvious it's all nonsense. Now, I do disagree a little bit with the fact that people are waking up, because I feel like there are, I shouldn't say I disagree. I feel like there are. I just think that there's probably a smaller percentage, because I am stunned by the people who I thought were awake, who are completely falling for the Ukraine narrative. And I'm not saying that what's happening in Ukraine isn't bad. Like, anytime there's war, we all lose. Nobody wins in war. And I think, the invasion of a country is never good, regardless who's doing it. I think it's concerning that some people seem to be more passionate about Ukraine, about Russia invading Ukraine, which borders them. They share cultures. There's a huge percentage of people in Ukraine that relate to Russian culture more than Ukrainian culture. they have a incentive in the politics of that country, and yet they didn't protest us getting involved in the politics of countries that aren't connected to us. We have no connection culturally, or or really any type of real connection to it towards them, and yet people are okay with this. Like, they just are. I mean, a lot of it's like the power of imagery. During the Iraq War, they banned showing caskets on the way back. Now you can see images of war everywhere. I'm like, oh, so it's okay to remind people what war actually is when we're not the ones doing the bombing, we're not the ones doing the killing. Regardless, I'm sure you guys will know that a lot of the imagery is bullshit. Some of it is not even real, or it's from other places. There is a lot of fake videos and stuff that are circulating, but outside of that, like, obviously war is always bad. And so why do you guys think, because this is one of the reasons why I brought up earlier Alexander Dugin, however you pronounce his name, the Russian philosopher and political intellect. He's fascinating because he has a perspective on why the West hates Russia and why they feel like they have to take Russia down as another world power. I'm really fascinated with this because it's like, is it because they oppose Western ideologies? Is it because they oppose doing work with us? Is it because you see China and it's like, we're friendly with China, they have a lot of influence in the US and whatnot? Do you think there's anything to the fact that maybe it's a cultural thing? Maybe because of the Christianity, maybe it's because of what do you think it is that makes, because like you said, this has been going on for a long time, and it like they consistently are the bad guys, where a lot of other countries will be the bad guys for a little bit, then the good guys if they do business with us, and the bad guys, you saw with Iraq, you saw with Iran. It's like counting on who you have beef with, then you can be our friends. What do you guys think is the reason why Russia is so consistently demonized as it's somebody that a threat to Western culture and Western countries?
Well, I think initially it was because of communism, because when you become a citizen of the United States, you have to sign a document that says you will not promote communism. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm an anti-capitalist, so I'm essentially of that belief system. But at the same time, I know the history. I know everything that happened. I know that no system is perfect, that no system is immune from authoritarianism, from totalitarianism, from corruption. And I think initially after the war, and actually the United States actually helped Nazis and helped use Nazis to do a lot of their dirty work. That is a fact. The United States has long okayed radical groups. You can go look at what happened in the Middle East or West Asia, and how they helped create these radical jihadists. Now, is it more still, I think, that ideology? No, I don't think so, because Russia is a capitalist country. Russia is ruled by Vladimir Putin, who took like the country into more a Western type of existence. Now they are representative of the East. They always have been. They're not Europe. And so I think that's a huge part of it now in terms of really what it is. I think it's economics. I think it's, the pipeline that they have access to, their closeness with China, who is a major player right now. I think that's more of why the opposition is so big right now. Obviously, culturally, yes, they're not Westerners, and they have some, remnants of the Eastern type of culture from before, from the USSR, and you have people there that live there that are very, anti-West. But at the same time, I think it's more of the connections that are made with China economically, and also with other countries that have been largely anti-Western imperialism, like, countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, all these countries in the global South. In fact, in the global South, Russia received a lot of support for their operation into Ukraine. They received a lot of support from these countries because a lot of these countries have suffered under U.S. hegemony and have been direct victims of U.S. imperialism in one way or another. So there are these relationships that are happening from all the victimized countries of the West. So I think it's just more of like the West coming to face all of the crimes it's committed, and all people now taking advantage of this power shift. And that's why, Russia is it, because Russia is the gateway to Eurasia, right? So there's a huge sector of control there. And now you have Africa and that sort of relationship happening. I think it initially was a culture thing, but more than ever, I think it's definitely more of an economic thing, because I just don't see, how with Russia in particular, it's anything to do with ideology. I could say that it could be ideology in Nicaragua or Cuba or these other places, but even then, I think it's more of the resistance to Western authority that it's about, rather than the ideology of communism. Is communism antithetical to capitalism? Yes, but but at the same time, I don't really care if you're a capitalist at this point, because to me, like I said before, the issue is this sort of circle of oligarchs that are trying to privatize the entire world and use us for just for data mining, for just little cogs to the machine. They don't really care about what happens to working people. There's too many of us. So I think if you're going to sit there and argue right now over, well, I'm a communist and I'm an anti-capitalist and I believe this and that, and you're wrong because you're a capitalist and blah, blah, blah. I think at this point in history, we're wasting our time because we're so close to not being able to have that argument. We're so close to being in a very fascist existence right now. And that fascism is coming not from Russia, not from Cuba. It's coming from the United States government and the surveillance state. And what is the United States government? Putin is a president, but is Joe Biden in charge? Is Kamala Harris, who talks to people like she's like a second grade teacher, is she in charge? I don't think so. I think these are all narrative managers, and I think these people are not in charge. I think the people really in charge are the surveillance state and the State Department and the people that call the shots when it comes to wars and when it comes to that sort of thing. I think presidents and Congress are all just PR managers, and they're all just, regurgitating things so the public can have a certain image. I think it's all theater. So that essentially is why is Russia such a big focus? It's because, well, Russia itself is pointing it out. Putin the other day went on a speech and said the United States is increasingly this idea that there's somehow, this great country is no longer the case. There's inequality, there's racism. I mean, he called out every single thing that exists in the United States today. And, Blinken had the audacity to get on there and talk about how, oh, Russia does this and they put their own puppets. And you could literally take his word, Russia, every time he said Russia, change it to the United States, and then it would be correct. So I do think that they see them as a threat because they hold a lot of influence or power, but also because of the relationship with China and the economics that are coming with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, rather than any sort of like, oh, like it's just a bunch of commies, because it's not anymore.
How do I explain this, Ricky? Ukraine is a small country next to Russia, a big country. I couldn't wait to do this from the moment she said that Kamala Harris speak to us like a second grader. But yeah, I mean, really, even though we're leftist, I think, or I'm once again, I'm just going to speak for myself. Even though I'm a leftist, I still believe what we see that's being played out in front of us has a lot more to do with entities above nation states. You know what I'm saying? It's about the World Economic Forum. Putin was a member of the World Economic Forum. So is, Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi and, Joe Biden. And what's that?
They took Putin out in Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, that's what they said. They took Putin and Tulsi Gabbard out, but are they doing that right now for more narrative management? And we'll be talking about that more tomorrow on the Combo Couch. But yeah, I mean, it's that's what people are saying right now is, oh well, Putin's removed and now he's working with Trump to beat back the oligarchs and the ruling class and whatnot. I mean, that's we don't know what's really playing out in front of us, right? A lot of people still believe in the nation state mentality, East versus West, and if it is East versus West, I think a lot of it has to do with power and control, economics, right? The majority of the United States budget is what? The military budget, right? That's where our business of the United States is war. So we have to propagate war. We have to always have a boogeyman. NATO has to exist because we have to have something to fight back the evil that is Vladimir Putin. I made that tweet. He's Vladimir Putin. He's not Thanos over here. But, I mean, if it's about economics, then yeah, it's about also controlling those resources, East versus West. Who's going to have the resources for the fourth industrial revolution, if that's the case? So, it could be two entities fighting over each other, or it could be this one big entity working together, making it look like they're fighting each other. WE style. What is WFEE? WEE? What's the World Wrestling? WWE, right?
Apasta. I don't think I disagree with that view that it's just going to be a bunch of oligarchs and they're not going to fight. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to always have some pushback. You're always going to have some people who say no. Because I think it's just as simplistic as people saying, no, nobody is getting together and doing nothing, to say that everybody's getting together and everything's an illusion. I think some things are really happening. I think some of these conflicts have been happening for a long time. There's no way that they're making up that Ukraine has this conflict. They've had a neo-Nazi problem for decades. So that's a real thing that's happening. Now, what's unsure is who's going to cooperate with who. Is Xi Jinping going to cooperate with the Klaus Schwab global agenda? Maybe. I mean, that you have a very large concentration of power in China. You have a lot of power, and I'm very, very suspect of deeply centralized power. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody around that sector is going to go along with it. It also doesn't mean that everybody else is also going to, like, Russia's going to go along with it. And the thing about Russia is they've been a very suffering population. They've suffered a lot throughout time. They lost so many people during World War II when they liberated the world of Nazis, and of course America came in and took the credit. But at the same time, do I trust politicians? No. Do I think Vladimir Putin is some sort of hero? No. But is there a possibility that perhaps not everybody wants to be a part of some global thing because they do want to keep some sort of nationalist aspect, which this is where nationalism could be good, because some people want to have their own identity. Some people want to be a part of the culture and the country they came from. So I think we're going to see that nationalism play towards globalism type of.
Let me digress though really quickly to the point though, when you said that, a lot of these oligarchs could have a lot of issues with each other. I do believe they're going to have issues with each other, but they understand their boundaries. I still believe that they maintain the principle that it's them versus the people, just like what it is in elections. Like, in other words, the elections, the rules are pretty much that you cheat within your own section, but at the end of the day, can we never let a third party gain power? At the end of the day, we can never let the Libertarians or the Green Party get any type of votes where they can then get in the system. I believe it's the same way with the oligarchs, which they'll make little minor chess moves within each other. But at the end of the day, they understand the principal goal is that we are the pest, we are the ants, we are the issue. And no matter what, we can't break that line, almost like the fourth wall of an actor, right? That you can't break that line to make sure that you don't stick on your goal, which is we have to take care of all these mouths to feed and these working class people, you know what I'm saying? And that's why, when you have AI coming in, you can see it's kind of that transition, like, well, guess what? We're not going to need you half as much as we needed you before. So I do believe that they can fight within each other, but I don't know, with this whole talk with Putin being removed from the from the World Economic Forum, Putin's still in Russia. Their protocols for COVID were just as bad as ours. You know what I'm saying? They still had a vaccine that wasn't tested. They don't even have a VAERS program, and they had oligarchs benefit off of, the protocols they put in place when it came to medicine in Russia as well. So, I mean, I don't know. Once again, I don't believe I have the answer, but I do believe that if they are working within a system, they'll never cross that line, which is the fact that they know that they're them and we are us. And
yeah, I just
they're at
think
war
it's
with
very
us.
simplistic to say that it's just like 10 people and that they're all working together and that they're just going to be able to carry this out like without any sort of opposition. I'm not saying it's going to come from like one of those 10, but I think there's definitely going to be differences. And I think in those differences, some people might realize that in order to have some sort of functioning society, you can't keep people unhappy. And so there's going to be the different mechanisms that take place. I don't think it's like 10 oligarchs sitting in a room and saying, oh, this is how we're going to do things. I think we give them too much credit in terms of that they have this figured out. I don't think they do. I really don't think that they do. I think that they're also like, there's a lot of they overextend themselves and they think people are stupid. And I agree with you there. And I think some of the most nefarious and dark people have a lot of power. People like Bill Gates, people like Klaus Schwab, people like that are huge members of the World Economic Forum. But I also don't think that it's just going to be like, oh, they're just going to be able to just do this so smoothly and people aren't, within this sort of sector. Because remember the chart that what's his face showed with the top and on the bottom. There's just so many avenues there that could really go wrong. And I don't think they counted for this situation. I don't think this was necessarily in the books in terms of how this conflict is going. It just doesn't seem like this is something they were accounting for. I think it's another psyop that's being used against us, but I also don't think it was being, they thought it was going to go a lot different than it's going.
Whether it's oligarchs, nation states, whatever the case may be, I think we can all probably agree that it's beyond the time for the people to say enough is enough and stand up. You know what I'm saying? The little people out there, it's beyond past that. They passed the shit line, Ricky, a long time ago.
Well, I think you're both right, because I look at, just the global elite, the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, as like, it's like a corporation, right? You have the corporation has a goal, and there's all these moving parts within that corporation. So Pfizer needs to get this emergency authorization for this experimental vaccine. It doesn't matter who's CEO, right? It doesn't matter who's the president of the company. Like, there might be infighting in regards to people, just people fighting over getting promoted or having a bigger portion of the pie or having more control. But the machine, the Pfizer machine, everybody's moving with that goal of control. And it's like, that's kind of how, the global elite kind of seem to work to me. It's like you have, it seems like they're pushing for a global government where they can control as much of the population and as much of the countries and as much as the world as possible. And within that, you're going to have fighting, right? Like, who's going to be the head honcho, who's going to get the influence here, who's going to have influence there, or whatever. But the goal does seem like build the infrastructure where everybody is connected and you can control everybody at all times. It seems like that's the direction. And you're seeing it with the smart cities. You're seeing it with obviously the lack of privacy. Some people are speculating, the rolling out of 5G is going to help with that. And so there's a lot of that. I mean, as long as there's been people, there's been people who want to control those people, and that has never changed. I mean, there's always been kings and queens or dictators or Genghis Khan trying to rule over other parts of the world. I mean, that's always happened. To think that now that's not happening, some people are just naive. Like, they assume that's that was in the past and now things are better. All they do now is just do a better job of PR, right? Like, I keep saying the difference between us going into Iraq and Afghanistan and Russia going into Ukraine is that we have a better PR department. Like, we took the time to justify our actions by saying, hey, there's weapons of mass destruction. By the way, there's anthrax in your mail. Aren't you afraid? We got to do something, right? And they got everybody emotional where they could now convince us to do something that was, made no sense and wasn't connected to the event that everybody was upset about. And Russia is just like, well, You know, like we've been warning you for a while. Don't expand NATO our way, or we're gonna be pissed. And then they're like, well, they did it. They crossed the line, so now we have to get involved. And they didn't take the time for the PR. Now, in regards to people are waking up to the Ukraine thing, and I think people are seeing that there's probably a lot of lying going on. But hasn't it concerned you how many people, like, you look at all the banning of athletes, the removing of soccer teams from tournaments, EA Sports removed Russian teams from FIFA, like all this, like this unity, this anti-Russian. I mean, is there anybody more hated than a unvaxxed Russian right now? Like, it's literally the most hated person in the world is an unvaxxed Russian. It's like they're treating Russians like they were treating people who didn't want to get the vaccine. Like they're just the other. They're the, we can't relate to them. You guys ever see that episode of Black Mirror where it was like the military was seeing the enemy as like some scary monster, and then I think they were giving them something in their food to see them as like a scary monster, and then whatever was making them see that wore off, and they realized they were just human. They were just people like they were, and all of a sudden they were sympathetic. And it's like that's kind of like what we do here. It's like we make these other people look like we have nothing in common. They are the other, and it's completely okay to hate them. And then when you meet them, you're like, oh, they're just like us. They have hobbies. They like music. They like sports. They have family. They have friends. Like they're not that different. And it is concerning how quickly people have jumped on this anti-Russian, craziness and all this pro-Ukraine stuff. And I'm all pro-Ukraine. I'm pro a country not being demolished by another country. But where was that hatred for all the other, unjust wars going on all over the world?
Well, the programming goes deep, right? You know what I'm saying? The Rocky IV, they had Ivan Drago kill Apollo Creed. You know what I'm saying? Like that. You hated the Russians for what they did. Even in Rambo 3, they had you rooting for the Mujahideen because they were fighting Russians. So, I mean, this program of Russophobia goes deep, deep into our systems and our souls. It's been going on for a long time. And yeah, I get it too as well. We point out all these, there's so many different factors to point out. Like nobody's shedding a tear for what's going on in Yemen, right? All these famous actors and actresses, they're silent on Yemen and Syria and Libya and whatnot, so it is just hypocritical at the very, the very least. But that's the whole thing is that American people want that clear cut good versus evil. And they've made Putin and made Russia the biggest evil that ever walked the face of the earth. So that's why people are buying it.
Yeah, and like it's this whole thing too where people don't understand the historical context of it, and so they can easily create a new reason. Like I hate it when people compare Russia to the United States for going in, because first of all, they, like you said, they warned about it, but also Ukraine has had a huge neo-Nazi problem. They after Lenin divided the territories, he ended up putting a lot of opposing groups together, which was the first mistake that shouldn't have happened. Then you have the Orange Revolution in 2008, and that was also a mess that the United States was also involved in. And then you have, of course, the 2014 Maidan coup, where the United States backed and armed neo-Nazis in Ukraine. So to me, what Russia did was essentially try to stop what the United States and NATO started in 2014, because they created this idea that Ukraine is this sovereign country. It's not. Ukraine stopped being a sovereign country in 2014 when they allowed another country to come in and coup the democratically elected leader and put in their puppet. I'm sorry, you stopped being a sovereign country at that point. And if the United States had Russians on the Mexico border and arming conflict in Texas or something like that, we wouldn't allow that. But it's because it's Russia and somebody pushing back against US hegemony that, of course, now it's like, oh, that's not okay. They can't say that it's about NATO now because Ukraine isn't a part of NATO. No, Ukraine isn't a part of NATO, but the whole point is to make Ukraine a part of NATO by the West. It's also the whole point is to wage a proxy war against Russia using Ukraine, They don't give a crap about Ukraine. They do not. This is not a war with Ukraine and Russia. This is a war between the United States and Russia via Ukraine. And that's what this is about here. Let's not mistake that. You know, a lot of people who on Twitter call themselves anarchists say, well, we support Ukrainians because they're a sovereign country and I support, you know, independence, and that it's like, but yeah, so do I, but that they're not. And a lot of these people in Ukraine and the Donbass region and in Donetsk and Luhansk demanded Putin's help. They wanted his help a long time ago. They wanted his help. If there's any criticism that is a fair criticism of Putin, is why he didn't act sooner. And a lot of the, you know, the pushback to that as well, they were trying to see if China would have their back. They were trying to see if the geopolitics would change, if this would continue. So I don't think it's just, yeah, there's a lot of propaganda, but that propaganda is facilitated, of course, by an accurate understanding of history and how we got here. People can't just talk about Putin's invasion without talking about everything else that really leads you to understand that any person in their given, like, the rational mind would have said, okay, no, we're putting our foot down, because if this continues, it's the NATO expansion that's going to happen. It's this sort of demand for the economic sector that they're fighting. They don't want what does the United States have any say in anything that goes on in that region? That region is so far away. Why is the United States even there? You could say that about them in the Middle East. You could say that about them everywhere. But it's this idea that the United States has any right in the first place, that Americans have any right to have an opinion on what another country does or doesn't do. It's none of our goddamn business. And we need to stop acting like it is, because we shouldn't be involved at all, period, end of story. And our involvement has only exacerbated crises and made them far worse.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm curious if some of their Putin, you know, being, he seems to be a Christian and being very much about preserving the culture of Russia. I wonder if that's a part of them being a threat, because when you look at globalists, when you look at, like, you know, it's that control capitalistic type of world that they're trying to build, you know, morals and culture, there's no place for that, you know. So it does seem like he feels like that's also being threatened, like their culture and what that country, and there's beautiful things about every country, you know. I do think that that I can see it from their perspective, that, like, hey, you know what, like they're threatening, they're trying to force their ideologies on us and trying to force their way of life on us. And there's a great older documentary between Sam Harris and Dan Carlin. Dan Carlin's been on my show before. I'm sure you guys know who he is from Hardcore History. And they were supposed to do a kind of a friendly swap cast, but it turned into a debate. And you know, I have mixed feelings about Sam Harris, to say the least. But Dan Carlin, as a historian, was trying to highlight this point to Sam Harris about, like, okay, you think a woman who's fully clothed is being forced to dress that way. What Sam Harris doesn't understand is culture. When you grow up like that, when that's a part of your culture, she's not being tortured, she's not being punished. That's the way you grew up, that's the way you dress. It's no different than me trying to save Asians from eating sushi or whatever because I don't like sushi. It's like, we need to save them. They're convinced it's good food. I think it's disgusting. Let's go over there, invade that country, and save them and give them a hamburger. Like, it's just it's a lack of understanding of other people's culture, and we've always had this issue where we feel like if any country's not living the way we're living, then we need to save them from that, and we need to expand our way of life to them. And some people just don't need saving. So yeah, I sorry, I probably should have more questions and less ranting. but thank you so much, guys, for being with me. I know I've taken up a bunch of your time and you guys are very busy. Can you let people know what social media platforms you guys are on, how they can connect with you, and the best places to listen to your show?
Yeah, sure, definitely. We always rock on the Rockfin, because that's the place that lets us speak. You know, we kind of mentioned that we are leftists and whatnot, but leftists get demonetized too. We've been demonetized for now 14 months on YouTube. They try to kneecap us, put us out of business. We were very fortunate to be on the Rockfin platform, and we've actually accelerated on that platform over there. So you can always go to theconvocouch.com to find out any of the links or ways you want to leave any love, whether it be PayPal, our crypto wallet, all that stuff. It's all there. And as you know, the unnamed show at the time, Ricky, you were there this morning. We have to get a name for the morning show. So that's been running on Slow News Day and the Convo Couch Premium. If you're one of our members, you can watch it over there, but you can always watch it for free. The Convo Couch never has up stuff on a paywall. We just don't do that. You know what I'm saying? It will have a live stream. We'll cut up our stream into sections. Some of the COVID sections we do, we'll put them back out as premium, but you can always access them on the live stream for free because we don't believe in putting stuff behind a paywall. So that's what's going on right now. And hopefully, who knows what it will be called. What name did you like, Ricky?
I'm trying to think. I know you guys bounced around a couple of them. I can't remember what they are. Were
The
there
Great Free Set was what Rick Overton gave us, but we were like, there's already a Great Free Set. Twitter and Fam even says it's kind of going to corner us. We're thinking Anarchy in the Morning.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, Anarchy in the Morning, because that could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Fam, did you want to add?
No, tell Steve I said you're a bunch of libertarians.
Tell Steve I'm sick of rebooking.
Pleasure.
I'll tell him for sure.
So where they can what platforms are you guys on? You said your Twitter account was suspended. Are you on Twitter again, or?
No, I'm on Twitter again. Yeah, they said it was just spam, which is bullshit. They did the same thing to Vanessa Beeley recently. So
he's got an awesome Telegram going too, by the way.
I got Telegram. I got Twitter. Obviously, I'm pretty active on Twitter. I have a Facebook, but I barely use it now. Instagram, YouTube. We're on the Convo Couch YouTube. We're also on the Convo Couch Rockfin. But Odyssey, I think we're going to start streaming there again. We have some stuff on Odyssey, but it's not always there. So.
Well, if you guys need help, somebody who's been a lifesaver for me is this guy, Matt Raymer from Content Save. We have a mutual friend, Richard Grove. You know who Richard Grove is from Grand Theft World? He's awesome. He's like a OG. When I started my show in 03 or in 2013, I've been listening to him for years and years, and he's just phenomenal intellect, just super smart, and just really just interesting thinker. But he hooked me up with this guy, Matt Raymer, who's a fan of probably your show. He's a fan of like tons of content creators and alternative media, but he's also an IT guy. And what he did, he created a system. So you know how when you upload a audio podcast to your host's website, it sends it to all the platforms for you, so you don't have to do that individually. Well, he does the same thing with video. So I upload. Well, I'm not on YouTube anymore. I got kicked off YouTube. But when I was on YouTube, now I use Odyssey as my main platform to upload to. But when I upload to one channel, it syncs to all my channels. So I upload. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's awesome. It saves so much time. So I upload to Odyssey, and then within like a day, that video will be on my Rockfin channel, my Float channel, my Rumble channel, my Minds channel, all the channels. So it saves tons of time, especially like a show like yours that it seems like it's the video. It's more of a video show than an audio show. So,
yeah, we don't have a podcast.
Yeah, you don't have.
No,
you don't have.
No.
Have you thought about doing that? Like
of course.
Yeah, we need to. I was actually going to tell Pasta he needs to get on that to get somebody to put it on audio because we don't have time to do it. We literally don't have time to do it.
Yeah, no. Well, Matt would be a great time saver if you guys are ever thinking to expanding to a lot of different video platforms, and just it saves you with uploading time. And he also he's working now with IPFS also, so you could put your stuff on a blockchain type of I can't even describe it because I'm not even sure exactly how it works, but it's like you put your video on a blockchain, so then it'll forever exist in the interwebs. So it's fascinating. I'll send you his information if you guys are intrigued. He's an awesome guy, and he's always more than willing to help people from being banned and just expanding their content. But thank you so much, guys, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I think one of the reasons you guys do so well and are growing so fast is because I think a lot of logical, open-minded people are looking for people who maybe lean left or maybe lean right, but aren't extremists. And you guys aren't. You're not radical lefts. You're not radical right. You're very open-minded. You're very willing to listen and talk and challenge ideas and whatnot. So I think we need more of that. And I can't thank you guys enough for being yourselves and doing your show.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you so much for having us on.
Thanks. Hey, enjoy your rest of your night, and I'll send you the links once it's up and live.
You got it, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Take care.